representing the University of Texas at Austin's Butler School of Music. Now, just by a show of hands, how many of you have been to Austin before? Oh, good. Oh, this is great. I was thinking it might be half and half. And how many of you really enjoy playing your instrument? Good. Great. Only half of the quartet raised their hands. That's so good. Okay, so we really hope that when you're of age or if you're a high school student that you consider Butler School of Music at UT Austin. And we have Mr. Salinas here, which I don't see him right now, but he has a table outside with some brochures. So if you're a high school student, feel free to pick some of those up. So we're going to start the program, and it's going to be about musical form. Now, just by a show of hands, how many of you know of what a musical form is at all? Nobody. Well, I bet you do, actually. I bet you do. Musical form, you hear it every day, whether it's your pop song, like where you have a verse, a chorus, and a verse, and then a chorus, 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 or a march, or maybe you've seen a waltz or a dance. So you're kind of familiar with musical form, even though you might not know that's what it's called. So we're going to do 3 different types of musical form. I'm going to start off with a prelude, then we're going to do a fugue, and lastly we're going to do sonata allegro form. So the prelude, and it's really apropos that I'm going to start with the prelude because prelude means to precede something. How many of you have been to an orchestra concert? Good. How about a symphony concert? Okay. Oh, not as many. Okay. So at a symphony concert, oftentimes they'll start the program with a prelude, and that just precedes the larger work. Or if you go to a solo concert, they might precede the concert with the prelude to start off the program. Okay? So I'm going to play one prelude by Sergei Rachmaninoff, who was a Russian composer, and he actually spent his latter half of his life in Beverly Hills, which is very close to where Jillian, the cellist, is from. I'm going to play over here, and then I'm going to do some demonstration for the last 3 preludes. So I know some of you can see me over here, some of you can't, but listen with really close ears, okay? So I hope you enjoy.
part of the performance. So now we're actually going to do another quite short little bit on the fugue. And a fugue, if any of you know Italian, do any of you know Italian or Latin? Does anyone take Latin in school? No, not really. Well, the word fugue comes from the Italian word fugare, and that means to chase or to follow. So in this fugue, you'll hear that there's an original subject or idea or musical phrase that one person starts with, and then gradually, one by one, everybody else in the quintet joins and plays the exact same idea, musical idea, subject, it's called, in a fugue. And the five people get layered on top of each other one by one. They're all following with this same thread, this same idea. So hopefully you'll be able to hear it really clearly when there's just one of us playing it, and then you can kind of try to follow it every time somebody else enters. So this fugue is by Dmitri Shostakovich, and it is a piano quintet. I want to ask, raise your hands if you've heard of Mozart. Yeah, everybody. Okay, so we're going to play a piece by Mozart now, and today's all about composers telling stories and how they do it, how they use structure and form to tell a story, and we're going to talk about the form sonata allegro now. Now, Mozart was one of the best storytellers of all time in terms of composers. And sometimes he left it up to the listener to decide what is happening in the story, and sometimes not. But structure always plays a huge role in understanding the story's meaning, of course. So now, Mozart's first movement of the string quartet that we're going to play, he tells a complete story. Now, Mario, what do you think I mean by the term complete story?
Well, I would say that a complete story, or almost every story, has a clear beginning, a middle, and the end, right? So, pretty much every writer finishes a story, doesn't just like leave it in the middle when you're most intrigued. Same thing with a composer. They just won't leave the piece of music in the middle when they're like developing something that they're really catching your attention. So to relate writers and composers, we've chosen a tale that pretty much, hopefully everybody here now, raise your hand if you heard of Alice in Wonderland. Yeah. Good. We chose well. So, just like the Alice in Wonderland, in the string quartet that we're about to play, which is Mozart string quartet number 17, nicknamed The Hunt, there's a clear beginning, a middle, and the end. So now we're going to see how Mozart and C.S. Lewis, which is the writer that wrote Alice in Wonderland, relate. This is Jillian.
Hi everyone. I'm going to come over here so you can see me. So, you guys have learned this in school, but the beginning of a literary story is called an introduction, right? Yes, okay. Now, in musical form, we call that an exposition. Can everybody remember that? Introduction, exposition, got it? Cool. So, let's take this all the way back to the top. In the beginning of Alice in Wonderland, Alice is sitting by a riverbank with her sister, and she's very tired, and her sister is just reading a book. A couple of times Alice peeked into that book, but there were no pictures and there were no conversations, so Alice wasn't really sure what to do, and she was kind of bored, so she wondered to herself if it would be entertaining to get up and go make some daisy chains or whatnot. Though while she was doing this, she saw a white rabbit running by her, and it had a waistcoat and a pocket watch, and she was just so confused. And that's where I'm going to end, because that is where the the introduction of this story ends. But we've learned a few very important things that you're supposed to pick up from the introduction, which is who, where, when, and why. So in Alice, we've learned, obviously, who is Alice, where is by the river, yeah, following me still? And when is on a hot day. So we know where we are. We know we're in the afternoon, it's hot, we're at the river, and Alice is bored. Okay, good, keep that in mind. Now we're going to move over to the Mozart. And like I said, the exposition of a musical piece is exactly the same as the introduction of a written story. I'm going to go ahead and make up a little story of my own just so this can relate. One morning, the Aiana string quartet was sleeping soundly in their cottage on Cape Cod. And off in the distance, they hear a hunting call, way off in the distance, and it just brings them to their feet. So they get up and run off outside into the twilight, and they're running, and they're running, and they're running, and they get a little distracted by some flowers, and they forget what they're doing, and they kind of pick some flowers for a little while, and then they suddenly remember, and then, right? So that's the why. The why is the part of the end of the introduction / exposition that you sort of know, but you don't really know. So we're going to go ahead and play that exposition, and I want you to keep the story I just told you about the four of us sleeping soundly, and then I'm going to come back in 1 second. Wants to know what comes next, right? Yeah? Okay. So we're going to play it one more time, but I'd like you to eliminate the story I just told you about us sleeping and going hunting, which probably makes no sense to you. And I'd like you to try to picture your own story as we play it one more time. And keep in mind that C.S. Lewis wrote Alice in Wonderland, and his main character is Alice. And we're playing a piece by Mozart, but the main character in the piece is not, in fact, Mozart, right? I chose it would be us. It would be the four of us, but you guys can choose whoever you want to be the main character in your story. So think about that, we'll play it one more time, and then hopefully we'll learn about the suspense part and go on to the middle of the story. Mysterious section.
So, the next section in a story is when all of the suspenseful and sort of interesting activity starts to happen, right? You start to wonder, actually, where is this story leading and where is it going to conclude? So, in a piece of music, that also happens right after the exposition, but in a piece of music, that's called the development. Makes sense, right? The story starts to develop, you start to see where it's headed. So in Alice in Wonderland, she sees this white rabbit. She's kind of a little bit hot. It's a very hot day. She might be feeling a little dizzy, a little loopy. You know, everybody's felt like that at some point in really hot weather, right? You're not really sure what's real and what isn't. You're just kind of going with it. So Alice decides to follow this rabbit with the waistcoat and the top hat and the little glasses. She follows him all the way down a rabbit hole. But when she gets down the rabbit hole, things really start to get strange. She sees a huge grinning cat sitting in a tree with a very, very long tail that's switching. And she begins to think that this cat might be rather devious, so she gets a little scared. She continues on her way. She meets Tweedledee and Tweedledum, two sort of bopping twins who are sitting on a log and sort of jumping up and down. She thinks, what is going on? What is going on? Then she runs into an advice-giving caterpillar who tries to help her, and she's really skeptical, and all of a sudden she finds herself at a trial being sentenced to death, and she thinks, what is going on? What is going to happen to me? Am I going to be okay? What am I going to do? So similarly, in Mozart, the next section of the piece, after the section that we just played, you'll hear that things also begin to get a little topsy-turvy. What we knew from the beginning, the themes and the motives and the harmonies, they start to be switched up a little bit. And while they're still recognizable as relating to the beginning, you know, they might still pertain to the reality that we once knew a little bit, but we're in sort of a dreamlike state, just like Alice, and we're not really sure where it's going to lead, how it's going to end up, if we're going to be okay, if we're going to get back to the original key that we started in. And so let's just hear that section and see what you think. And as Jillian said, try to keep relating whatever you chose in the beginning that we just played, whoever you chose for your main character, whatever you thought was going on, try to relate that still to what we're about to play and see if you can build on what you were originally thinking. right? That was a weird harmony. So let's see what Hannah has to tell us about the end of the story.
Well, now back to Alice in Wonderland for a second. Her story concludes rather abruptly, where at the very moment that the Queen's minions are about to take her into custody, her sister, Alice's sister, wakes her from her slumber, and she finds herself again just sitting by the riverbed. Now, things appear to be almost the same as she left them when she followed the White Rabbit down the hole, but she's changed by the experience of what she saw down there. And similarly, in Mozart's story, we come back to what we've heard at the beginning. This is called the recapitulation. It's a recap of what we heard before. But at the same time, things are a little bit different. We're changed by that development section that we heard before. So we're going to hear the very end of the development, going back into the recap to see how Mozart, how he moves back into the beginning section again. So this is the entire first movement of Mozart's quartet, nicknamed The Hunt.
Christian.
Was your question, how does it feel to play in an orchestra? Well, it feels a lot different than playing in a quartet. There's something really great about playing with lots and lots of other musicians and being surrounded by just all of that sound and playing with, we're all string players. Occasionally we play with a pianist, but it's quite different to be playing with a whole brass and percussion and woodwind section. Does anybody else want to answer this question?
Well, also in orchestra, you don't get to make all of the decisions with everybody in the orchestra. There's somebody with a baton, somebody with a baton directing you and always saying, softer here, louder here, you're late, you're early. But the four of us, and sometimes the five of us, when our Tina is with us, we get to talk amongst ourselves about our decisions, whether or not Mario wants to play louder, or if Hannah would like to play softer. So that's one of the biggest differences, I think, for us. Does that answer your question? Who's next?
How professional do you feel when you play?
How professional do we feel? Look or feel? Mario has a good answer.
Very professional.
We love doing what we do, and we enjoy a lot being able to bring what we do to you all. So we feel very professional because that's our job, and we love doing it.
Everyone, if you could try to be quiet so you can respect all of your classmates, you can hear their questions, that'd be great.
Out of all those songs, which one was your favorite?
Ooh, I got put on the spot. Well, out of the ones that I played, I really liked the Circus Juggler that I told you the best because it's the most fun to play. Out of theirs, I really liked the Mozart. Did you all like the Mozart too? Yeah.
How long would it take us to get to the level of difficulty you guys played? How long would it take us?
That's an interesting question. I mean, it's different for everybody, but it takes many, many, many hours of very focused work. So I think that we all probably, when we were your age, we were probably practicing at least 3 hours a day, probably, if not more. It's different for everybody, but at certain points in your life you'll practice more, at certain points you'll need to practice less. A lot of people go through a stage where they're practicing 6 hours a day, and they're just really, really trying to hone their technique on their instrument, their facility, and they're also developing their own musical personality is starting to sort of come through a little bit more. So that happens naturally as you get more proficient on your instrument and as you get older also as a person and have more experiences. So a long time, I would say.
Are you friends when you don't have your instruments? Do you hang out?
Good question. The four of us as a quartet spend a lot of time together in rehearsal. We spend about 4 or 5 hours every day practicing together. But the great thing is that we do like each other personally. Even before we started this quartet, we were all friends. So, of course, we have differences. We're different people, and we have musical disagreements in rehearsal. Like Jillian said, Mario wants to play louder and I want to play softer. But we always get through it because we like each other.
Do you guys use slurs?
We do use slurs. Why do you ask that? May I ask why you want me to know that?
Because I use them in my orchestra class.
Oh, very good. Does everybody here know what a slur is? Great. I'm going to tell those of you who don't know. It's great that everybody knows what a slur is. A slur is when you play multiple notes together without changing your bow. So it's a smooth articulation. Perfect. That's a good question. We use slurs and separate notes, pretty much everything.
What inspired you guys to play?
Well, individually or to play together? Well, as it was mentioned before, I started on violin when I was 2, which is a little young, I think. But what inspired me to play the cello was an unknown magical drawing to it, I guess. I heard it on the radio one time in a car, and it inspired me to take that up instead. I continued to play both instruments for about 6 years until I quit the violin and stuck with the cello. And in fact, string quartets is one of the things that has inspired me to continue playing and to continue playing with these people. Anybody else?
Me first. No. Honestly, when I started, it was just I won't say a bad kid, but my parents wanted to keep me busy as much as possible, so I wouldn't be doing other things that I should be doing. So my brother played violin, so they were like, oh, maybe we should start him on an instrument, and so that's how I started. I would rather, honestly, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, can I just go play soccer on the street in Spain? But they were like, no, you should just practice, even if it's 40 minutes a day. Like, okay. And then as years went by, and then I really, really started liking it, and string quartets were one of the things that really made me like it, because it's like just hearing 4 instruments that are so similar, but they can make so many things sound different at the same time. So, I don't know, I really enjoyed it.
I really like your question because everybody always has a different inspiration for why they like to play music. Mine is just, I remember being in kindergarten class and I was struck by the violin. And I went home and I had to have violin lessons. And my whole life, ever since I was 5, which is when I started playing the violin, I always kind of just knew I would be a musician. It was never a question in my mind. So, here's Rosie.
Just trying to think about that question. I think for me, kind of like Jillian, it was when I was a really little baby, actually, my mom sat me on her lap and held the violin in front of me like this and plucked it. And I think from that moment forward, I was just fascinated by the instrument, and I started asking to play the violin when I was about 3 or 4. And my mother just gave me a little violin, and I sort of did my thing with it for a year on my own. And I think that music and playing an instrument has really made me feel like I'm better able to access kind of what is very essential about being a person. And it kind of helps to put that out into the world and feel your own expression of it. So for me, that's been the sort of tying thread that keeps inspiring me.
Well, I was a little bit more like Mario. I was singing too much around the house, and my mother kind of threw me into piano lessons because she said I couldn't sing. So not as inspirational as Rosie, but since I couldn't sing and I started playing piano, it kept me out of trouble, like Mario, and it just grew to be a passion that I love. So keep practicing, okay?
Okay, so do you guys get nervous sometimes when you're like up there and you're in front of everybody?
Why, yes, you couldn't tell.
No.
Yes, I think all of us get nervous at different points. Sometimes it's predictable and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you'll feel very, very nervous when you weren't expecting to, and other times you'll feel completely fine and grounded when it's a really big deal. And so it just kind of depends, but I think that everybody learns a little bit of their own pattern with nervousness, and you know, you just try to take deep breaths and go with it and know that it's going to be fun once you get up there and start playing your instrument, because that's what you love to do and kind of gets you through it. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that every single performer, even the really, really famous ones, still get nervous, sometimes at least. Keeps you on your toes.
What about the college that you attended attracted you to it the most?
Sorry, can you ask that question one more time?
The college you attended, what attracted you to it the most?
To the specific college? Oh, well, I didn't go to a music school for my undergraduate degree, so I wanted to, even though I was pretty sure that I wanted to be a musician ultimately, I wanted to have the experience of kind of knowing a lot of people who weren't musicians and something that was different, and for me that was visual art, because that's also another very strong passion that I have. So that was appealing to me because the school that I went to also had a lot of musicians and had a very strong music department, but it wasn't limiting me to doing that only.
I chose my school because I knew and loved the violin teacher. We got on very well, and it was great.
I went to college at the Manhattan School of Music in New York City, and before I went there, I did not like New York City, and I have to say that almost nothing drew me to the decision to go to Manhattan School of Music, except that I knew that there was going to be a lot of opportunities to play chamber music and string quartets, and that was promised to me before I accepted the contract to go to school there, and I continued on that path ever since, so I'm really glad I went there.
Like Hannah, I went to the Barcelona Conservatory for my undergrad, and I did 1 year in Germany also. But it was always the teacher. I started taking lessons. I would go every week from my hometown to Barcelona, which is 6 hours away, by myself. And like I would go have lessons, and I really liked the teacher. So I eventually auditioned to the school, and I ended up going there for my undergrad.
I think similar to what Alden said, I also like the idea of, a school where there's other things to do besides music, so you can learn other stuff. But definitely if you want to play whatever your instrument is, the teacher is really important.
How long did it take you to perfect the horns?
Well, we started learning this piece in September, right? So we've been working on it off and on since September. And it's funny that you said perfect, because we actually never consider that we've perfected a piece of music, because there's always, always, always something left to do, or there's something left to realize, or there's another way of looking at it, another lens you can see the music through. So for us, getting it to a high level takes probably about 2 months, I'd say, and then from that point forward, we try to develop our ideas further and kind of build on our initial foundation.
What's the difference between the way the cello sounds and the violin sounds?
Well, why don't we give Jillian the mic for that one?
I love your question. Well, the difference between a cello and the violin in terms of sound, well, let's first of all, let's look at these. So, just because of the size, there's so much more room in the cello to resonate, right? All the vibrations from the string, they just go on and on forever. And the tiny little violin, they go on for a little while in a higher register, but can you play your range? Let's take a look. And then on the cello, we kind of encompass all of the ranges of the instruments in the string quartet. Yeah? Okay. Yeah?
How long did it take you to do the Alice in Wonderland?
To do the what?
Alice in Wonderland.
To do the Alice in Wonderland. You mean the story? Well, I think that we all read the story sometime when we were about, well, probably younger than you guys are now, and probably subconsciously started relating stories just like that to the music that we're playing. So we chose Alice in Wonderland a couple weeks ago to bring to you today because we all could find strongly the connections between the two. So I don't know if that's exactly what you meant by learning Alice in Wonderland, but we kind of came up with a way to learn Alice in Wonderland and Mozart together. Does that make sense?
Why do you guys move so much when you play, like the violin?
just the vehicle so that you can dance, right? I mean, if you didn't have music, you wouldn't really be able to dance because no one would know what you were doing. You'd just be kind of like bopping around and everyone would be like, why are you twitching? So when we play music, we use the very natural element that it just sort of, it asks you to move. It gets your body resonating with the instrument and the rhythms. And also, when you play chamber music, it's a very useful form of communicating with the other people in your quartet or your quintet or your orchestra even, communicating with them about what you're about to produce in terms of sound. So it gives a lot of information to the other members of your group, and then also it gives additional information to your audience also, so that the audience might pick up on something that they see while you're moving, and then they might be able to relate that to what they hear from the other instrument, and it might give them an even better understanding of what you're trying to tell them. So I hope that answers part of your question anyways. Moral of the story is dance as much as you can.